Welcome everybody. Today is Tuesday, the 30th of September, 2025. Today is Alternate Tuning Tuesday. Today we are going to be looking at open G tuning, which we have looked at before, but I've got a few new things to share. I've also been playing with the slide as well. Not really able to play a whole slide piece yet, but I'll show you some of the slide ideas that work in open G, and we'll talk a little bit about why they work in open G in particular. Just a refresher, what is open G? Open G is a tuning that gives us a G major chord on the open string. So that's our G major. So if that's our one chord, and just jump up here, have a 4 chord, 5 chord, 1 chord. So of course we can play a 12-bar blues. You can also mess with the slide, do the same sort of thing, but if we still want to use the slide effects, well, if the nut is a G major chord, what else is a G major chord? The 12th fret is going to have all the same notes an octave up. So here, there's our 1 chord. So what we can do is we can play with vibrato with the strings. And have our 1 chord here, and then go slide up to the 5 chord, or I'm sorry, the 4 chord. And then we have vibrato on the 1 chord. So then we can go to the 5. And we can end on the higher version of the 1 where we have more options thanks to our bottleneck slide. Now, everything I just told you is also true of open D. It just changes the chords somewhat, right? So what's special about open G? Why have both tunings? Well, what's cool about open G is, well, let's review what our strings are here, right? So this is a D string, just like in drop D, and just like in open D. This is a G string, another D string, another G string. B string is still a B string, and the high E string becomes a high D string. So we have 2 Gs, 2 Ds to play with, and that B string gets us to that G chord, right? So we have G string, B string, D string. So that right there, just like we had a triad on the bottom 3 strings in open D, I guess technically we still do, we have a triad on the top 3 strings, the highest strings in open G, which allows us to just use these top 3 strings to play close position licks. So when you're playing slide in open D, for the most part, you are on this string, the high E string, which in that case is a high D string. And there's not really as much you can do with the F sharp there. But we can use all 3 of these strings at the 12th fret, and we have a G an octave higher. With our bass string here on the 5th fret, we have a tension between a bass string and a major chord that is G and G. So a lot of the slide work that people do in open G is predicated on that. It's predicated on being down here, licks like this. You also have some interesting possibilities on the third string and the fifth string here. You have a lot of this kind of thing going on. Where you can slide from the flat third to the major third. And a lot of times that flows beautifully into what you're doing down here on the G string, the regular G string. So that can be same thing, 2 to 3. Those are both, again, G strings. And that flows beautifully into this. You've got this slide along your low G string, for want of a better term, which flows beautifully into this string, this top string slide from the 3rd to the 5th fret. A lot of songs are predicated on exactly that kind of thing. Death Letter Blues kind of uses a snap of that string followed by those two slide licks right after one another. That is very characteristic of what's called Delta Blues. You'll see that in Robert Johnson, Son House. They'll also play an open D. They'll also use other tunings, but you see a lot of this open G kind of material. So, I've been playing a little with the slide. I've got a long way to go technique-wise. We're going to talk a little bit about the slide later in the week. But let's talk about how these licks work. So if we're on the G string, G sharp, that's an A. That's our B flat. So that is what? Flat and third. Same on this string. It's our A. It's our B flat, flat and third. So we kind of go from the get to that flat and third, and then what happens on this string? Let's figure it out. So D, E, E flat, E, F, and what's that? That's our G. So here we're going from A to B flat, and here we're going to G. So we've got that flat third, and then we go back to the first. That is a very common figure in this kind of music. You'll see that a lot. You'll see that a lot in Delta Blues. Again, we're going to talk later this week more about slide and how it works. We are also going to talk a little bit about some of our options in open G. This book right here, Slide Basics by David Hamburger. is a pretty good resource for playing with these open tunings. I would recommend checking it out. We're going to be going over some of the things in this book later in the week. A lot of times you'll make use of the interval between those bottom three strings to be playing chord tones at different positions on the neck. And I bet you know which positions. If you're a blues man, you know where your fourth and your fifth are, right? So since this is already a G, and this is a G, what do we got here? Well, so G, G sharp, A, B flat, D, C. So what is C to G? Well, we know it's the fourth, right? And what's this? That's our D. So we've got a huge number of licks that are going to be predicated on where those chord tones are. But they're not always going to be played as chords. You'll see a lot of this kind of thing in Delta blues. You'll see a lot of figures where and you'll often find yourself sliding from the flat 7 of a given note to that note, which is a very satisfying bluesy transition, much like the flat third to the major third. So a great deal of your licks are going to be built right in here, right between the tension between those sevenths of the 1 at the 12. And I mean the seventh of the specific scale of that string, mind you, not necessarily of the chord or of the key, but that's a natural place to go to find bluesy licks. And if you want to be playing chord tones of your fifth note, they're going to be right here. For the 4 chord. And right there for the 5 chord. So, a lot of what you're going to be doing in open G on these top 3 strings, the highest 3 strings, is going to be sliding from the 3rd fret to the 5th, whether you're doing it quarterly or as individual notes, and also sliding from the 5th to the 7th. And on these strings, on your lower G strings, you're frequently going to be sliding into the flat 3rd from the 2nd fret usually, this kind of thing. So that is kind of where you're going to find most of your slide licks in open G. You're also going to have a lot of turnaround type licks that are predicated on low G, and then this kind of like semi-chromatic walk down thing that happens on this D string, along with this open G string, so this kind of thing. So that is going to be very characteristic of Delta blues, and that's going to be very characteristic of playing in open G. Now, not all open G music is going to be bluesy or slide driven. There is, let me see if I can find a good example without flipping through too many books here. Let's see. Okay, so a lot of the finger-picked pieces that were popularized during the folk revival are predicated on these kind of sing-songy arrangements of like folk songs and Christmas songs. So this is like a characteristic bar of John Fahey's arrangement of the First Noel. I'm gonna play it very slow because it's not really under my fingers. So. Now, if I played that a lot faster, you would kind of recognize it as the motif from the First Noel. But you'll see a lot of that kind of thing, which, if you'll notice, it kind of looks a lot like that chromatic walk down we just played. This thing right here, where we're, oops, upside down. That's a very satisfying thing, and it's very easy to access when you have the D and G strings right next to each other. You'll see similar motifs going on in open D as well, but something about open G is just so pretty, I guess you could call it. Quick review of some of the other things about open G. Historically, in the finger-picking blues and acoustic folk community, you'll often hear it referred to as Spanish tuning. That's not because it was particularly popular in Spain, mind you. That was because there was a particular song called Spanish Fandango that was much like we discussed in Open D, the song Vestipol and how that gave rise to Vestipol tuning. The song Spanish Fandango was a piece of folk music that was arranged to sound Spanish by none other than Henry Worrell, the same guy who popularized or wrote Vestipol. So that is yet another tuning that we can blame Harry for kind of misnaming. The reason this is confusing is because Spanish tuning already refers to something. During the Renaissance and Baroque and even into the Victorian period, there were different tunings on guitars. You would frequently have, what you'd now find on like I don't know what they call it, a guitarlele, like a guitar ukulele hybrid that's really a ukulele size guitar that's still tuned like a guitar, but higher. So it will be A standard tuning, basically. That was a very popular tuning in England, and any number of other tunings were also popular in England and to a lesser extent the whole Anglophone world. The particular tuning that we call standard tuning now, the E, A, D, G, B, E, that we normally tune our guitars to when it's not Alternate Tuning Tuesday, that was referred to as Spanish tuning by much of the English-speaking world. Because of this song, because it sounded Spanish, which probably meant that it led itself to like Phrygian licks or something that people stereotyped as sounding Spanish. Much like that little pentatonic riff sounds Asian, and they kind of use it in old racist cartoons when somebody looks Chinese. That kind of sounded Spanish. It sounded like gypsy music to people. It sounded like flamenco, even though it wasn't. hence Spanish, that kind of, and the actual guitar music of Spain that became popular a little later, that actually was a common tuning. It wasn't the only tuning used in Spain, but standard tuning was Spanish tuning to the English-speaking world. And in the blues world, open G tuning is Spanish tuning. So don't let that confuse you too much. At some point, I will learn Spanish fandango and try it out. I will also try to learn some open G tunes that are not slide tunes, but we will be revisiting slide later in the week. My fingerstyle blues FAQ episode was a success, and I really enjoyed doing it. So I'm going to start doing a more blues-focused show that I'm going to call Beginner at the Crossroads. And I'm just going to kind of explore blues-specific topics, the first of which is going to be playing with a slide in Delta blues and how the slide works and what to think about, whether you should play with the slide, what tunings you can play with slide in. So that's going to be kind of a companion show to this show. Not sure exactly when I'm going to record that, probably in the next few days here. But thank you for watching. This has been Alternate Tuning Tuesday. My name is Bill, and thank you for watching my channel.